wants to talk about something or ask something.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Okay. And you know, God, he does these things with me where I can ask him a question, but he makes me ask someone else for a reason. I don't know always the reason, but I'm like, you always make me call you out. You never answer me right away. So I know once I ask the question, he will answer. But it's about, you know how wisdom, when you're in the realm, is an entity, understanding. Time. Is time an actual entity? I'm like, how can time talk to me if it's not an entity? I've had time talk to me a couple of times, pun intended. And I'm just scratching my head about it.
Okay. Oh, that's a really interesting subject or question, isn't it? I mean, from the point of, can there be an entity called time that is not necessarily actually time? Because if one sense all time is within God or whatever in the eternal, it's all within him. So I would say there can definitely be an entity that could have that title. I've not met one, but then I've met Metatron, who's the timekeeper and the keykeeper, who is very much involved in times and seasons. But time itself is anything inanimate or without life that God has created? Probably not, in one sense. If he's within everything, then everything has the opportunity or the possibility of communication with, and time would be something you can communicate with, because there must be a sentience within it. I mean, I had a conversation with God about this morning. We were talking about restoration and what restoration was and how all things is going to go way beyond my present understanding of all things. And we had a sort of an hour's me listening to a lot of things he said, really, but sometimes me responding with, give me more. But generally, yeah. And he was indicating that there is life in everything. Nothing is inanimate because he's within all of it. And therefore there is a sentience that creation has that we are supposed to be able to connect to be harmonious with. And therefore time must be part of that. So I would say potentially it must be possible to communicate with everything and anything, because God has created it not to be inanimate, but to have life. And he is within it all. So there is a connection. Can't say I've ever talked to any entity called time or time as an entity, but then creation is longing and groaning and has an emotional thing. And, there's a lot of talk today about elementals and how those elementals are, God spoke to me this morning about it in terms of elementals that God created to be the intermediaries between physical and spiritual and everything. And of course, they're looking for sonship to respond to, and they've responded to that which isn't sonship and been influenced in a negative way. So if it is possible to communicate with spheres of creation like air or water or whatever else, trees, are there, I would say time must have some communicative way, because it needs restoration. Time itself needs to be restored. So yeah, what did it say? That'd be more interesting. What did it actually say?
Well, one time said, command me, it pleases me to serve you. That was the most positive thing. And one time it's really command me, use what you have, the authority you have. And each time it spoke, I had time miracles. So yeah, it encourages me to command it, to use my authority with time.
Well, yes, because if you think about it, if you are able to expand and contract time, and go back into time, then it is responding to you. I mean, I legislate for all the time that I need to fulfill everything I'm called to do every day, and it gives me that. So whether you say, well, I'm contracting that time, expanding that time, an hour becomes 8 hours or whatever, it is responding to me in some way. So it must be sentient. I'm choosing to create that reality where that is possible, but what is it that's actually responding to my choice? When I choose to observe something, the creation responds to it, the photons of the creation respond to it, and then begin to collapse into reality. So something is able to sentiently be engaging with my choices and my thinking. So why not? Why shouldn't time? Because I command time every day. I just never really did it as I'm going to talk to a particular entity. But is it an entity, or is it an expression of something which is sentient, but isn't what you could say was a being, but actually was still sentient that you could still communicate to? Because that's for me, when I've communicated with various things, in that way, sometimes, yes, wisdom is an entity that you can engage with her as a being and see her as a being. Time can be represented to us perhaps by something. I mean, did you see time, or did you just hear it, or what did it look like?
Just audible.
Yeah.
I didn't, and I did not see time. That's what I'd like to see. I don't, fall into the father time. You know how we do all that. But it was audible. And, it's just right now, it's just got me scratching my head like, wait a minute.
Yeah. But I would say whatever I do in engaging time, it responds to me and expands, contracts, and serves me in a way so I can fulfill God's purposes. So whatever way it's sentient, it doesn't really matter in one sense if you can see it, but if you can engage with it in some way, then I think that's probably true for all of creation. And I think we're going to discover more ways of interacting and engaging with things that we now think are inanimate, and they are not inanimate, and the life of God is in it, and it is possible to communicate it. I want to see creation set free, and I want to see creation to respond to our sonship and come into that freedom. And I'm beginning to make declarations and decrees and talk to those things in a sense that they are hearing me. I believe they're sentient. I believe they can, and I do believe they can respond. I do think we're going to get more revelation of that, particularly, I guess, if we're functioning in sonship in a level that we can engage with that.
Well, there's been a real recent stress on seed time, emphasis on time, harvest, seed, time, harvest. So he's trying to make some connection there. And, you ask the Lord, and he just, you just feel his smile, and he wants me to ask someone else. So, and now I know he'll sit down and maybe explain it more now that I've done that.
Maybe so, yeah. And sometimes it isn't a cognitive explanation that we can just describe, but something we experience and feel and sense and engage without necessarily always being able to put words on our explanation. But, my conversation this morning was very much along the lines of that. How do we communicate with creation? What has God done to facilitate us? I remember going back before everything fell into what it is now, and I felt connected to creation at an emotional level, and I felt the harmony and the just amazing oneness of creation. And then I sort of felt the contradiction of today, in which there's discord and disharmony and groaning and misery. And it was like, it so motivated me to want to see creation restored back to God's original intent and purpose. And it was emotional and it was sentience. And I did feel it and I did sense it. You know, and we, in literary writing, obviously you can give inanimate things emotion, but they don't. I mean, we talk about the angry sea, don't we? You know, if the sea is, you know, got a lot of waves, it can be described as the angry sea, as if we're giving the sea emotions. Well, in actual reality, it probably, in an elemental way, probably does. But we've used it as a literary form because it's a way of describing something. But actually, there may be much more truth to those things than actually we have understood and we're understanding more. So I am going to seek to engage elementals to get an understanding of elementals, and how we can relate to that and how that connects us to creation and how we can influence that in a positive way through our sonship rather than allowing them to be influenced by other things. And I do believe there is way more to it all. And, you know, time must be an element to that. Yeah, good. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I'm just, at the moment, I'm just doing the Vision Destiny 2020 series, which is, you know, sharing my journals and sharing the things that, you know, God has said and I've encountered this year. And I've encountered some pretty wild stuff this year, which I'm going to share. But I've got a lot. I mean, I'm up to session 14 and, you know, I've still got a month and a half to go yet, or a month and a bit to go of my conversation. So, you know, there's a lot that I've experienced and a lot that's related to dimensions, other dimensions, engaging those dimensions, engaging fallen beings, you know, connecting to this elemental perspective. It's been a very interesting year, a very challenging year personally and emotionally in other areas, but actually very, very interesting in terms of opening up a revelation of restoration and creation and where we are to engage with it. So I will publish my discussion with God around creation and elementals and this sentience, you know, beginning of January. I'm well ahead of the game, so I'm already on session 6. So I've just got another 14 or, you know, up to 14 or 15 to do. So I should be able to get that out in early January. Just to share some of the things that have happened and some of the things that God has talked to me about, which are quite exciting, some of them, you know, particularly in engaging the fallen realm. And I've engaged several other dimensions, which, you know, were quite an intense experience. So quite interesting. So, yeah. Okay. All right. Anyone else got a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Talking about legislation, I'm starting to believe that when we do legislation, I always had the question for you, I never ask it. How are others going to know what we've legislated for to claim it for their own? But I'm starting to be of the belief that perhaps we write our own legislation as we grow.
Well, yeah, I think we do. I think we as we mature in sonship, we realize the levels of authority that we have, and then we start exercising that authority, and we make declarations and decrees and creative things that are increasing in government and authority. I think when you release a declaration or a decree into creation, or into the spiritual atmosphere, into the atmosphere of the earth, into the spheres that we have access to on the earth, the frequency continues and vibrates for people to engage with it. So when people connect to it spiritually, when the conditions are right, and what we declare, even though they may never know that we've declared it, their spirit can resonate with that we have released, and it can inspire or challenge or connect. And that may eventually relate to us engaging with people personally in a way, but actually I think it's more than that. And I when I released the blue light thing, a few years ago now, people started to respond to that blue light. Well, how? Well, that blue light, whatever it was from my declaration, a call to sonship, a call to government, that's really what it was, a call to people to come together and connect. People started to do that, and people started to experience it. And it was very much just I release a blue light, but I have the testimonies of people's experiences with it. So I think people can connect to the legislation and the things we're doing, even if they've never hear it directly from us, but it's still vibrating in there, in creation, waiting for connection, as is God's voice vibrating, holding all things together. When we speak it out, it's not like a ripple which goes out and then hits something and stops, and the energy of it is dissipated. It still vibrates without dissipation. So we speak it, and it isn't like it fades away. It just vibrates with the same energy when we first spoke it, which means it's continually able to be connected unless there was a time limit on what we had a mandate to say or do. And then if the time limit is up, then it does fade away. But if there's something which there is no time limit on, then it doesn't stop. And therefore, next year, someone can connect to something I decreed and declared, or you decreed and declared 5 years ago, because it still has that energy within it. The living word of God, Jesus, we're in him, he's in us. And when we speak according to the authority that we have in him, that energy is still connectable to, and is effective. And so I do believe that, it isn't just we do something, say something, and then whoever may connect to it, experience it, then it is ongoing. And I'm making declarations and decrees now for the year, next year, the year after, because you've got to get things moving. We often think it is a cause and effect, which is an instant cause and effect of press a button and this happens. What I say causes an effect, but that effect may come about next year or the year after or the year after. But I'm speaking it now, and I'm speaking it deliberately to continue and outwork. And some of what I'm decreeing now won't come until the time or the season is right, but my words are even creating the capacity for those times and seasons to come into being, because they have energy and they have life in them that is creative, and therefore they connect with creation creatively to bring about things in the future from what we've said in the past, because within God and we're within him, there's all now. So is all the living energy of the life, living water, everything's alive, the source, the light, all of that, we are in and is in us. And therefore, I think what we do as sons has an ongoing benefit, value, and we need to see things beyond the instant. I need this, I'm going to have it now because I'm going to say it now. We need to be saying things now that will start moving towards us, which will manifest at the right time and the right season, because we've already prepared the way, rather than oh my word, I've got nothing. I need to legislate for something because I need it now. And that often comes out of fear, panic, worry, anxiety, and not rest. I'm seeking first the kingdom. I'm at rest in his provision, which is coming towards me because I've called it to me, and it is coming. You know, and I think that is because we carry the frequency, we are a frequency, and the things we say are also frequency that has energy and life within them, which again has the ability to connect in that way, which is great because that means you don't have to know everyone to affect them, you know. And the way frequency works and the way heaven's legislation works, it is logarithmic in its scale. So it is not linear, and therefore I can only affect one person because I'm one person. If I'm operating in a level of consciousness in sonship, of immaturity, I could affect hundreds of people, thousands of people, or hundreds of thousands of people or more through what I say and what I do, because there's a logarithmic. It's like the scale of earthquakes, Richter scale. You know, 6.1 is not 0.1 more than 6. It's 10 times more than 6. You know, so there's an exponential sense to the effect that we can have. And you can have 1 or 2 or 3 or let's say 12 people operating at a level of consciousness which, you know, has been given a scale, and 200 is the scale which really tips you into conscious awareness, and below 200 you're living really without really conscious awareness of life. If you go up to up to 500, you know, that is way more than 200. It's not just 300 more. It is this logarithmic, you know, exponential sense. So, you know, a few people operating in a higher level of ascension, if you like, in consciousness, can effectively touch a lot of people, but also can balance out the negativity of all of those hundreds of thousands or millions of people who are functioning at a less than level of God intended its sonship. And at the moment, they're part of the problem rather than part of the solution. Therefore, we don't need equal numbers in the kingdom to engage the world. We can operate at a less, and, you know, our frequency of sonship is affecting the planet. You know, Schumann's frequency or Schumann's resonance, which is what they calculate the planet to be operating at, the frequency, which I think is 7.83 or something, has been spiking since 2004. Yeah, and sometimes it's been spiking up to 30 points above. And I do believe that is our sonship, which is affecting changes within creation. What we need to do is sustain that and have a continual, sustained frequency generating energy and light and love and truth and all of that to bring about the change and transformation that's really needed in creation itself. You know, it is waiting for the revealing of the sons of God. I do believe we are being revealed, and the frequency increases are a result of that revelation of who we are. The more we come into a fuller knowledge of our identity in sonship, the greater that frequency effect will have. The more our mind expands in consciousness to function according to sonship, like the mind of Christ, the more effect our thinking will do and our words will have as we begin to focus our attention and direct that towards creation, creatively, restoratively, reconciliation. All of those things, I think, we have the word and the ministry of reconciliation. We are ambassadors of reconciliation, not just to people, but the whole of creation. You know, and I think that is the key to beginning to engage these things which we have always thought were perhaps just inanimate in a sentient, emotional, and mental way. So our consciousness, once expanded, to begin to realize the power of our sonship, We'll choose to create realities, and creation will respond to our choice and manifest those realities because of the level of authority we carry in sonship. So I think there's a lot more to come when it comes to legislation, and particularly how our frequency affects the whole of creation. And if we come together in agreement, then there is an exponential sense of that. 1 puts 1,000, 2, 10,000. There's a tenfold exponential increase in agreement. When we are together in unity, there is a commanded blessing. And I do believe the more people come together in that united oneness perspective, the greater the exponential increase of the authority that we will operate when we agree with what we're saying and doing together. So there's a lot more to come, I think.
Well, I wanted to say something on this authority thing before I hang up here. And it was something that the Holy Spirit wanted me specifically to tell believers. And it was something that I experienced the other day. I actually had my spirit, there was a truth serum device placed, let's see, I believe it was placed, yeah, it was placed in my spirit. And I don't know if it has to do because of what we're walking in as far as legislation, taking our authority as sons of God. But see, when you ask the Spirit a question, it tells the truth. And this was placed in me by the enemy, and I had to remove it. But it was what I called a truth serum device. So just to, you know, I've had to deal with that, and I've had to deal with some weird stuff, but he wanted me to mention that this morning.
Okay. I think there's a lot of revelation to do with our interaction with creation and with the spiritual realms, which, you know, is coming to light. I think some of these issues, you know, are, you know, some of it may just be terminology of what this is the way you describe it, and other people may have experienced it in a way that they describe differently. But I do believe that there's more being unveiled and revealed towards this type of thing. How do some of these things work? And, you know, what are some of the things that are being used to limit our sonship, you know, and all of those things, because the enemy wants to rob, kill, and destroy. So there's a sense where God wants to give us abundant life, and so that's flowing, and rivers of living water are flowing from our innermost being, but there's things that we have to subdue and overcome. And some of those things will relate to, you know, what's going on in us, which you've described in that way. Perhaps I would think some other people may describe it differently, but I understand what you're saying. There's something in it which is looking to connect to us, which has, you know, potentially a negative effect, but also can glean from us, I guess, or discern from us. But, you know.
Well, I renounced it and came out of agreement with that, and just took authority over it and commanded it to leave. And I know it left. So yeah, it was the enemy is after revelation. And when we walk in the power and authority of our identity, he wants to know what's different about them. Why are they progressing so much? Why are they making headway? You know, because his idea is to stop us, and because he's got his own plan. So he wants to know the secrets that we possess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think there is a sense where when we're walking according to the path of the tree of life, that knowledge is hidden from the understanding of the enemy. Whereas when we walk according to the knowledge of the tree of the good and evil, that knowledge has come and is engaged with the enemy because it's operating out of the wrong tree, the wrong pathway. So I think the likelihood is there is a sense of trying to get revelation truth to give insight into how to stop or effectively hinder, and that's sort of some of what's going on. So yeah, definitely. All right, any other questions?
I'll bring up some things too.
Yep.
There's been this big emphasis on the natural in my teachings with the Lord, bringing all that spiritual into the natural manifestation and into the physical. I mean, for instance, like rest. We say, I trust God, I'm at rest, a seat of rest. And, I say that all the time. And the Lord said, but look at your body. I'm like, okay. He said, do you see this tension in your shoulder? And I'm like, wow. I mean, he is teaching me how to actually bring rest to my physical body. Things that you don't even realize, that maybe your arm is tense, or, that you're holding tension somewhere in your body. And he's showing me how to bring not just my spirit or my soul at rest, but even the body to a place of rest. It's mind-boggling to me, because these are things I never really noticed until he brought it to my attention. Does anybody else, does that sound strange? Anybody else ever really experienced that?
No, I think it's absolutely how, if you think of that we are spirit, soul, and body designed to be in oneness, and if there is any tension between any part of us, then that inherently brings us out of rest. Then the physical definitely comes into alignment with the spiritual, and within our soul, our emotions and all of that. And of course, trapped trauma in our memories, trapped trauma in our body, in our emotions, all of that has a hugely negative effect on rest. And rest is an absolutely vital key to our sonship. If we're not in rest, what are we in? And that includes spirit, soul, and body. 1 Thessalonians 5:23 talks about the presence of God bringing us into that place of being sanctified, spirit, soul, and body, being made whole, spirit, soul, and body. And I do believe that there should be no disharmony, tension, anxiety, or any other thing that is actually affecting spirit, soul, or body, or mind, emotions, and will within the soul, and all the other aspects of it, our conscience, our imagination, our reason within our soul, but also the way we see, where we hear, where we feel, where we taste, where we touch, where we sense, all of that actually being, unified oneness, wholeness, peace, which is really where rest is manifested fully into our whole being. And anything that contradicts that rest needs to be brought into alignment with rest. And I think that's really, really important for people to get. I focus on being at rest and living from rest, and just enjoying God's love that brings me into that place of rest. I center my day on it. I center my life around it every morning. That's the first thing I want to do when I wake up, is to engage rest. I've been resting all night, in the garden. My soul's been at rest by still waters, in green pastures. I've come to him, but then I choose again to come to Jesus, in first love, to yoke myself to him, take his yoke upon me, and enter rest. Because that's what he said. All who are weary and heavy laden, which comes from doing things our own way, in our own strength, come to me and find rest. And take my yoke upon you. And it says, you know, to find rest for your souls. And the rest for the spirit, you know, for me, the spirit's at rest. But the soul can be not at rest, and the spirit and the soul together cannot be at rest with one another if there's this tension. And so the soul coming to the plate of rest then can bring the body into a state of rest. And sometimes we deliberately bring the body into a state of rest, meditation we call it, relaxing, getting to that place of almost suspension of things around us, so that the soul and spirit can come together into rest. So, you know, when I do meditation for rest, I'm very much focused on engaging body, soul, spirit in the love, joy, and peace of God, living in forgiveness, living in that joy that comes from being in him, living in that security of being in that amazing relationship, and seeing that actually create an atmosphere of rest around my life. Yeah, so that others can experience the rest that I'm creating from the rivers of living water that are flowing from my innermost being. And so absolutely, I think the natural must come into agreement with our spiritual, emotional, to come into wholeness and oneness. And a lot of people's issues are around trauma, which is trapped in the cells of the body, in body memory. It can be trapped in emotional memories. It can be trapped in a lot of areas of our soul, and that effectively affects the body. I mean, most sickness and illness and things comes from the trauma that's within, whether it be mental, physical, emotional, or any other trauma, you know. And fear is very much connected to trauma. And of course, perfect love casts out fear. We cannot be at rest if we're in fear. So fear, you know, is one of the things that needs to be brought into submission to rest. And if you're afraid, usually is because we don't trust. Why am I afraid of something that I think must be bigger than God to protect me? Because I don't trust God to protect me. So we do have this sense where God is wanting to bring us into this wholeness, body, soul, and spirit, that's completely aligned and completely one. And there is just this complete sense of being, which is awesome. Very awesome. So, awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Pamela, you got your hand up there. So.
Yeah. Sorry, I was driving in. Yeah, that was perfect. That was amazing. Understanding of that, because it is spirit to soul, soul to body. And so where we have to understand is we can be doing the work in the soul and allowing, you know, God to heal and restore, but we still have to govern the body. And so addressing the body like that is exactly the way it should be done. It's like, okay, body, you know, it's okay to relax now, you know, we're safe. And literally when we walk people through a reconnection process, it's the same thing you were describing. It's like, you know, yes, I am at rest, but your shoulders are over your ears, you know. So it's like, all right, so let's talk to your body and let's get your body relaxed, and then really let that agreement and that alignment between spirit to soul, soul to body be at one. And then a lot of work can be done once that's been achieved. But can I go back to something y'all were talking about a minute ago?
Yep.
We met with our first group about a month ago, and we were in our bench meeting the Monday before we had the group on Saturday, and just governing it and just asking the Lord to take a look, see, you know, through the Spirit as to anything that needed to be addressed. And we saw a dragon that was circling and trying to get information, and was just hanging out. So just asked the family, father, son, the Holy Spirit, what to do with that, and just really felt that God led me in this direction. And I just addressed the dragon because my thought was, well, let's just go kill it, but that's not how love works. So, so and it was totally the Spirit of God that was speaking through me, because this wasn't anything that I would have come up with at all. But I just addressed the dragon and acknowledged and even respected, I know that's a hard thing to swallow, that it had a right to be there through the hearts of the people. And we were going into a territory that had pretty much a very strong religious foundation. So I acknowledged with this dragon that it had a right to be there through the hearts of the people, and then turned around and said, but we have been invited in. And so we will be bringing the kingdom of God into this space during this time frame. And we have a legal right to do that because of the invitation. And so I thought, well, that would be pretty much the end of it. But it went a step further, and I felt like the Father say, invite it to come. It will be bound from operating, but I would love for it to meet the authentic, or be introduced to the authentic. And so I was like, did I hear that right? I mean, I thought maybe it'd be, bound up by rope outside the meeting or something like that. But God is like, no, invite it in. So I said, you're welcome to come. You may not interfere because of the legal right that we have, but you're welcome to come. And it just diminished completely, and it was over. And so then I thought, all right, well, we'll probably have to contend with this again, as we go into the meeting and maybe enforce this. But it didn't happen. And what I didn't know in this meeting was that there was a lot of people that were ingrained in the church. I had total liberty to speak from the heart of the family. And all I saw as I was looking out were lights that were going off, just the deposits that were being made. It was just, we just looked at, when it was over, we just really were just stunned at how receptive people were to really, which is really not a religious framework. And then I also did what you did. I thought, well, I don't want to argue with anybody. So we on the Q&A, we just gave out little pieces of paper and to let people write their questions so that I could conveniently sort through those. I know you didn't do that. You tackled the hard ones right off the bat. But I thought, well, this is my first rodeo, so I was going to just selectively go through these. We didn't have one question. Now, there were several people that came up afterwards to talk, but nobody challenged in a group setting, a religious question to go into debate. So I was really, I was just astounded.
Yeah. I mean, I believe the more we come into maturity and sonship, we will begin to do things in love, but in the past we would have done something in a different sort of spirit. It
Right.
would have been effective to a degree, but actually would not be fully representing God's heart in a situation. So in a sense, what was the point of engaging that dragon in conversation and then offering some connecting if that didn't have a potential for something restorative to come out of it?
Right.
And so otherwise God would have just said, well, just go and kill it, get rid of it, and that'll be the end of it. And of course you can't kill a spiritual entity. It's a spirit. You can't kill a spirit. God created it spiritual. You can't kill it. And I think the sort of take a sword, chop off its head is symbolic of taking its authority, chop off its tail to stop its sphere of operation, and split it open and receive that which it has robbed they're symbolic. You know, we're not talking about physical slaying. It's not a
Right.
physical thing. It's a spiritual thing which represents something. So removing the head represents removing the authority. It doesn't actually mean we're killing something. You can't kill a spirit. So if God is indicating, and, you know, I think this is a good, you know, opportunity to talk about this, that we can enter into dialogue, but we come from a position of authority.
Right.
Is it possible to bring restoration to a fallen being, entity, rather than destruction? And, you know, which more aligns with God's purpose of restoration of all things and his original intent? He didn't create any of those beings to be dragons like that. He
Right.
created them to be beings of light, and they effectively have been deceived and covered in darkness. So, you know, I think this is an indication that there's more to this that God wants us to explore. And personally, this year, I have engaged with 3 dragons and have been instrumental in offering them restoration. And, you know, I'm not going to go into the details of the process right here, but if you have a mandate to engage them restoratively, then it is effective. They don't believe they can be restored because we have told them they can't. When I first engaged one that was operating as a dragon in our spheres, hindering us in our mountains, I didn't know what to do, but God said, let me show you, let me take you, be inspired by me. And I basically forgave it for what it was doing. The first reaction was, you don't forgive us, you can't forgive us, we can't be forgiven. So, well, I said, well, I have authority in this sphere, I choose to forgive you. And then I felt, and I, as a representative of an ambassador of reconciliation, offer you God's forgiveness. And it was just shocked and argued, no, we can't be forgiven. We've been told we cannot be forgiven. There is no way out. So I then, having insisted that I had forgiven, I then said, I offer you restoration. I offer you that restoration. And again, there was this reaction. No, we cannot be restored. The sons of God have told us we cannot be restored. We can't be restored. Well, I'm a son of God and I'm telling you, you can. And I'm here as an ambassador on behalf of God telling you, you can. And I was getting nowhere in the sense of there was such a residue of what we have created theologically and doctrinally, which has caused us to take the view that the restoration of anything other than a person is not possible, is what they believe. Because they believe it because we say it, because we're sons. So at that point, I was engaging with the heart of God, and I'm saying, I need to know and feel your heart for this situation. And I need to know what to do, because I am not getting through here by purely speaking the truth. So the Father says, well, what do I do with you? So I thought, well, you take me within. I'm in the shadow of your wing. I'm hiding within you. So I then extended my spirit in light, because I was operating as a light being, and I extended my spirit over this being and encapsulated it in light and love. And so I loved on it. I demonstrated what Father has done to me in that intimate place. I did to this being, and the love that I then communicated pierced the darkness and the scales of darkness that were covering its body. And there was a glimpse of light I saw. So I continued, and I offered restoration within love, and it responded, and essentially light burst through the darkness, and it emerged from the scales of darkness in beautiful, shining, radiant light. And it was just such an awesome thing. I mean, I was so overwhelmed, so blessed, and I felt the pleasure of the Father's heart. I felt heaven responding. I felt the other angelic beings who were friends of the fallen ones in the past responding. There was celebration. I mean, it was such joy. And then I said, and I restore you to your position. What is your name? And the name was Destiny, and we had known it as Destiny Robber. That was its dark name, but its true name was Destiny. So
Wow.
it responded and now cooperates and works with us to facilitate people coming into destiny and not being robbed of destiny. That was, in the middle of the year. And last week, I actually went back and engaged 2 more within our sphere who had functioned as a bench of 3, but were now only 2. And I engaged them in the same way. And eventually I saw them respond as well. So in the past, I would have had no mindset for that. I would have done what everyone else has been taught to do: get a sword, sword of the spirit, chop off the head, chop off the tail, split it open, blah, blah, blah. But having engaged God and engaged the heart of God, I know restoration is of all things. And I know God did not create those angelic beings to be separated from him or to be shrouded and imprisoned in darkness. He created them as light, and he wants them to be in the light. So I know this is a very, very controversial subject, and I am aware that, I've not taught it in that sense. So I've not given you any scriptural background to that or any, anything else, which I will do, and I am going to do it. And I've got a session I'm working on to do that. But having engaged some 3-dimensional races and facilitated some restoration there, and now engaged here, I know that this is absolutely categorically the heart of God. And, you sharing your testimony of that God inspired you and directed you to speak and to engage rather than bind or in a negative way, or get a sword and try and kill the thing, which is the sort of the way that people take it, for me is another indication that as we begin to engage deeper in the love of God ourselves, we will begin to realize God's love, which will demolish some of those belief systems and constructs that have essentially held us captive and limited us in our sonship. So, and I'm not saying I'm going to build a theology here. I just saying
Right.
God asked me to do it. I did it. He showed me how to do it. I've done it several times now. I know others have also done it. Therefore, someone's theology is never going to overcome someone's testimony. And so,
well, you just do what God invites you to do, and is directing you to do.
Absolutely.
And it was interesting because the countenance of the dragon was initially very intimidating, and I asked for wisdom and for discernment as to what was happening, and what they revealed was it was curiosity. And so when I was able to meet it there, it wasn't intimidating at all. There was absolutely, I was so taken back by the compassion. And also this is what was so mind-blowing, but the respect that it did have a right to be there.
Yeah.
And God has been really showing us in reconnection how people hide behind religion. You know, it is a safe place to park. You know, just like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but you know, if I were trying to hide wounds and traumas and things like that and went to alcohol, I could switch that out for religion and still be a broken human being. It just looks better, you know. And so we have been working with people in treating these coping strategies and defense systems with love and compassion, and we're just watching them diffuse. You know, and I think I shared this with you a while back, that there was very strong opposition to a reconnection, and God just prompted me to have the person say, hey, religion, you know, thank you for trying to protect me, but, you know, I'm choosing God, and, you know, you're welcome to come and be transformed, but I can't let you control my house anymore. You know, I can't let you control me anymore. And we're just watching love and compassion with the things that we used to bind and rebuke is absolutely transforming and bringing people into relationship with God instead of fighting the enemy. There's love, you know, love because in all fairness, we co-created in building these defense systems, you know, from our old patterns and our old lives and what we grew up in. So to have some compassion and mercy there and say, you know, no, thank you. I've chosen this way, and appreciate, you know, what you're trying to do, but I don't need that anymore. I have a loving God. And interestingly enough, God will have us introduce these opposing forces to the family, and they just are so ready to give up. And what that does is that closes the door to the enemy's access. Rather than fighting the enemy, let's just go to the roots of that trauma and allow that to be healed and restored. And you're just gently closing that door, you know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm just amazed at the power of love and how it can reach the deepest, darkest place.
absolutely. Yeah.
I
I mean, I know these subjects are quite controversial. I know even those people who will listen to this will be challenged with the view of, you know, can dragon, you're talking about spiritual entities, fallen angels, effectively, can they be restored? And I know there are obviously a lot of people out there saying, no, they can't, and you shouldn't. I think some people are using different language, like the word redeemed. Can they be redeemed? Well, I'm talking about restored, not redeemed. I believe redemption is for the sons of God, sons of men, but I do believe restoration is possible for all things. And so we're not trying to redeem someone. We're trying to see them restored to their position that they've fallen from. And I would encourage people who may be challenged by this, or who have heard a lot of people saying, no, you can't do this, it isn't wrong, these people are deceived or whatever, to take it back to God yourself. Don't be convinced one way or another by me or others are saying. I'm saying you can do this because that's my testimony. Others saying, no, you can't. They don't have a testimony of doing it because they're just saying you can't. So they don't have a testimony in that because they've not done it, or you can't not have a testimony of not doing it. That's negative. You can only have a testimony of doing something. So they're saying you can't, but take it back to God. Ask God himself to give you the revelation of his heart of love, to show you himself what is and what isn't possible in restoration. And don't take it from individuals. Go back and get it from God. But do it with an open mind and an open heart, and don't go with a confirmationally biased view that you already know that this isn't possible. You have to go with an open heart and say, God, I don't believe this is possible, but if it is, I really want you to show me. Then I believe God will begin to open a lot of things which we have previously thought impossible, and begin to change our thinking in a way which aligns with his, and which does align with love. God is love. You know, and I think so many people have this thing of, well, God is love, yes, but God is just, as if God's justice is going to be not love. You know, as if God can separate himself. Well, I'm being just and a judge now, and I'm not going to do this in love. He cannot not ever be love. So whatever justice, which is righteousness and justice, are the foundation of the throne and the kingdom, that is going to come out of love, not out of revenge, retribution, whatever. And ultimately, if when God tells us to forgive everyone from our heart, if he did not forgive everyone from his heart, that would be totally hypocritical. And God has forgiven everyone and everything, because that is the nature of love. God could not be love if he holds unforgiveness towards anyone or anything. But of course he doesn't. Therefore, if there's no unforgiveness towards anyone and there is forgiveness, forgiveness is to bring restoration. You know, 2 Corinthians 5:19, where it says that God was in Christ, in other words, in him, actually reconciling the cosmos to himself, not counting anyone's trespasses against them.
Amen.
That is the nature of reconciliation. God has reconciled. We have this ministry to say, be reconciled. In other words, come into the reconciliation that actually God has already done. Now, if you come into agreement and believe that, you will come into the fullness of what reconciliation is. And God has done that. And I do believe that he wants us to understand in deeper and greater depth what is the height and depth and breadth of God, and that nothing can be separated from him, from love. And that's who he is. So I know there's a lot of controversy. I know, you know, and I'm not trying to say other people are right, wrong. I'm just saying, I'm sharing my testimony, and I would ask that you would engage God for the revelation that he will give you. And then take that and do that. Don't try and use the Bible to support an argument over something. All that does is creates division. Let's ask God, the living word, Jesus, the living word of God, engage the Spirit of truth who will lead us into that truth for the revelation of his heart to unveil the truth in this situation. You know, we have 40,000 denominations all using the Bible to prove their point. So using the Bible to prove or disprove anything doesn't work. So we need to come to a different view. And I would encourage all those who do disagree and don't believe that you can see any fallen angel or any other dimensional thing restored, to engage God with that, you know, and you're entitled to that belief. I am not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm just saying my own personal testimony. And I don't want to argue with people. I don't want to come out in any negative way, in any way. But I would encourage everyone to pursue, you know, the love of God, and how far, how wide, how high that love goes. You know, and I know it is never going to stop. It's never going to give up, and it's never going to fail. And for me, I want to see all things restored, everything back to God's original intention and purpose, and have nothing that isn't restored back to that. Anyway, yeah, Pamela, you got your hand up there.
Yeah, I know we may be short on time. Just to confirm, what you said about dragons. I think, you know, there was a time when I never knew that there was a such thing as a good dragon. And I think we've talked about that years past. And I think over a year ago, I told you the Lord said to me that I would tame a dragon. And I didn't understand what he meant by that. I met this high-ranking dragon, good dragon, and she put a tooth. She said she was long in the tooth. And she put a dragon tooth, out of her mouth into my hand. And I have used this hand, my right hand, placed it on top of a dragon's head. And the tooth went through the head, but not to damage the dragon, but to burn up dross. You know what I'm saying? To
Mm.
burn out those thoughts, those same thoughts that I cannot be redeemed. I am lost.
Mm.
And so, I mean, he's given me different method, but the same thing. You know, I approach this dragon in love, and I put my hand on its head. And, you know, you have to get large. You have to grow in the spirit to address the dragon. But I put my hand on its head, and the tooth came out of my hand through this dragon's head. And he became meek and lovable and repentant. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So I agree. When I thought, everything I thought about dragons has been changed completely.
I mean, to be honest, everything I thought about everything has been changed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was like the deconstruction of my limited understanding and, you know, what I've been taught to believe. And when you engage the truth and go into the depths of truth deeper and deeper, you realize how much there is. You know, it's like you take the red pill, and how deep does this rabbit hole go? It's still going deeper and deeper and deeper, you know. And for me, all of that, though, everything that I've experienced and everything that I've discovered only affirms it's all about love.
Amen.
You know, all of it has just given me a deeper experience of love, who God is, his nature, his character, his essence. Everything that he is love, you know. And that means I've experienced the deeper love for myself. I've experienced how he loves creation. I've seen how he loves all of every person, every child of his, that he's at work in all of them to bring good. He is the light that's within all of them to unveil that light, to reveal, you know, it has totally revolutionized everything. But actually, I am a more loving person. I am able to, having experienced love, you know, love one another as I have loved you. So now all I have to do is just be loved, and I can love. You know, it's not a duty or an obligation. It is a response. Freely you've received, freely give. And the more love I've received, the more love I've experienced, the depth of that, the height of it, the breadth of it, the more you can then give it, and the more you can create an atmosphere of love around your life, which will begin to affect creation in a positive way to bring its freedom from that bondage to corruption. Because I think those who would say, well, you cannot see any of these things restored, well, how can creation be set free from its bondage to corruption if those things that are in bondage to corruption cannot be restored? If you're saying, well, only some of creation can be set free, rather than all of creation, it doesn't say some of creation, it's creation. And are they not created beings? And God wants to set them free from their bondage to corruption. For me, that sums the whole thing up in Romans 8, in that creation is longing, eagerly waiting for the revealing of the sons of God. Why? So that it can be set free into the freedom of the glory of our sonship, which is love expressed. So for me, love really is the key to all of it, and it must be experienced for us to be able to release it. So we love because he first loved us, and he wants to love on us. He wants to demonstrate at a depth which goes beyond anything we could have ever imagined or thought. And then that empowers us to be that love to others and to creation itself. Yeah, Pamela, we'll finish up with.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing that really gives you that perspective is if you are in a place of judgment where it's right, wrong, black, white, good, bad, you know, we're in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When you have that somewhat dualistic thinking, we're in that, and that kind of thinking has its place in this world. But when we're looking through the perspective and the heart of God, we have to step out of that to gain his perspective and to gain another view, which his ways are so much higher than our ways. So I think that's a good indication if immediately we're off the bat judging something and it is black and white, good, bad, right, wrong, win, lose, whatever, then we have to be able to say, all right, I need to step out of that and get into the heart of God before I judge something or before I, and so it's just gaining his heart. And it is this unfathomable depth of love. And it can't go against itself. Yeah, total agreement. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to open that can of stuff today.
That's all right. No, I mean, it's a subject that needs to come and be debated and dialogued over. And, I'm open to dialogue on it. But I would hope that people would actually understand what I am and others are saying. No one has ever mentioned redeeming demons or anything like that, because that's another issue and that's another discussion point. What are they? And all that. But we're talking about things that God has created, and we're on a journey towards a deeper revelation of love. And if you say I'm right and you're wrong, immediately you are excluding people from in relationship if you're making relationship conditional on whether we agree over these issues. And that is not God's way. And so if we can respect and honor each other on our journey, that we're all where we are, and maybe things will change for all of us going forward, then I think we can still maintain relationship and be part of this family of God without having to exclude others on the basis of what they believe or not. And I think that for me is my encouragement to everyone: keep in love, respect and honor one another, and respect that there are differences, but we're all where we are on our journey. And for all of us, I'm sure that there is change and transformation ahead. And there are other things that I probably believe right now that I'm sure God will transform me and change me over in the future. But I'm prepared for that. And I'm not willing to become rigid and inflexible, then exclude others on the basis of, well, they don't agree with me. They don't have to agree with me. No one has to agree with me. But I want people to find the truth in God. And that then will continue love's journey to be maturing in sonship, in love, to be a demonstration of love to creation that's desperately longing for love. And it's us, the sons of God, who are loved, that are responsible to love creation. And in loving creation, see creation restored back to its original intention that God had, which is harmony and oneness, which is awesome when you begin to sense and feel and touch that in that way. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. So